Welcome back to the Geary Theory. I'm your host, Lauren Geary, where we kind of break through the mainstream narrative and talk about the things that nobody wants to talk about. All right, today I'm talking to Dr. Christina Parks. Dr. Parks has her Ph.D. from the University of Michigan. She's a cellular and molecular biologist. Now, she's a truth seeker. I'm not just saying that. She seeks truth like nobody else. She will hear a fact and a statement, and she will deep dive on it and gather all the scientific data. And then she's so kind to put it in a simple, easy to understand writing. And then she put it on her website, which is VITA, VITA, which stands for Vaccine Injury Teaching Alliance. And on there, you can go there and find all the information she's gathered about vaccines, even about health. She even had somebody on recently talking about the risk of mold in your home. So it's kind of a good resource to have on any sort of even diet things. You can go in there and deep dive on it and cut through all these things that we see on social media where they're like, this is bad for you, this is good for you. No. Stop. Just go to her website and she'll make it super simple for you. And that being said, I was looking for someone that can answer this question for me. My question was, are vaccines and SIDS, which stands for sudden infant death syndrome, are they related? I'm telling you, there's theories out there, but she's the only expert that's actively talking about this that I could find. And I was like, let's deep dive on this. Please answer this question for me, I asked her, and let's get into the scientific information behind it. We did that, and we did so much more. You don't want to miss this podcast. If you're a parent, if you're pregnant, if you know someone who's pregnant, you know somebody with a young child, please share this with them. It never hurts to be informed. If you go on making decisions that you would have made anyway, at least you did it with full knowledge and information. That's all we're about here. We're not about changing someone to make different decisions. I just want everyone to have the information because information is powerful and information is what allows you to make the best decisions in life. And so this is one of those podcasts you don't want to miss. I'm telling you. Let's get into it. Started you on this journey to, so you're so focused on educating people on vaccines, and you've started the VITA organization.
VITA.
Sorry, VITA. And this is clearly a passion of yours, and I love that. What kind of started you on this journey? Is there was something that happened? Where did you begin?
It was actually, I was in graduate school. I was in doing my PhD in cellular and molecular biology in the Department of Immunology. And we were just figuring out what the receptors were for the immune system. So like when they say, this is research, we don't know what we're doing. If we knew what we were doing, it wouldn't be called research. Right? So I was like, they're giving all of these vaccines, and then they added chickenpox to the schedule. And I was like, why would you make it mandatory to get a chickenpox vaccine for a really mild childhood illness that gives almost lifelong immunity?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because any insult to the immune system is going to have, to some degree, unknown effects. Then I saw that they were adding more and more vaccines to the childhood schedule under the age of 2. And we know that the immune system isn't developed in a way that facilitates a full immune response in terms of long-term antibodies until after, 2 to 3 years old.
Yeah.
Beyond that, the infant brain isn't developed. And so why would you be adding something that's going to be inflammatory? And so with my knowledge of the immune system, these things were not making sense. And then Andrew Wakefield and a couple of other labs came out with some studies suggesting that autism may have something to do with a subclinical measles infection from the vaccine strain measles.
Wow.
And then he got like destroyed. And then the CDC came out and said, we've seen no evidence that the MMR causes autism. And I know their language was, they were trying to obscure the issue. I could see that. They're like, kind of like, well, could because we haven't looked, right? And I was like, what did that guy do? And at that point, that was way back in the day. So you couldn't follow a story the way you can do an internet search for it now. Like you'd hear a blip about it, you read the scientific study, and then, find out later that this guy had been destroyed, but you didn't know, you couldn't there weren't all these videos like there are now where you can go follow a story. So, and I didn't know what Andrew Wakefield looked like. I didn't know, but I knew other researchers were showing something similar.
Mm.
So I became very concerned. At that point, I didn't know about the 1986 Childhood Injury Act, which gave indemnity to vaccine manufacturers, so they had no liability for anything that was on the childhood schedule. I didn't know that. So I was struggling to make sense of why they were doing these things that didn't make sense immunologically.
Mhm.
So I learned some things, but when I went to research vaccination for our two children that were adopted for Ethiopia, it's really hard to find information. Like Dr. Sears had a book out, and as I read it, it was so ludicrous. I was like crying and laughing at the same time, laughing because I was like, he'd go through this whole list of like, that the rotavirus vaccine could cause intussusception, where the intestines telescope inside each other. And then at the end, he'd be like, but in general, maybe this is a good vaccine. And I know he was trying to treat it lightly. And I was like crying. I'm like, what are we doing? Like, what are we doing? And I was frustrated. I was glad to find that book, but frustrated about the general lack of information as a scientist.
Yeah.
And then a friend of mine at church, uh, friend requested me, and I'm such an introvert. I was like, yeah. And I was like, well, I don't want to be rude. Went back and forth, finally accepted her request. I'm like an in-person friend, right?
Yeah.
So one of the first things she posted was a video by Dr. Suzanne Humphreys, who was a nephrologist who started to see her patients being vaccine injured. And she always cited PubMed, which is where all the scientific studies are. When I was in graduate school, your lab had a subscription to that, and you had to pay for it. Only scientists could get at it. But now with the internet and everything, a lot of the papers were free online. And so when she cited a paper and I could type in the title and it would come right up, I was like, woohoo. And so as a researcher, I knew how to research the references and go. And so I watched all of her videos. Within a month, I had watched every video she had, bought her both of her books, read them cover to cover, researched all of the papers, And so as I was horrified by what I found out, I was also concerned for many of these children who had vaccine injured. And so I felt a responsibility to step into this space because not very many people were qualified to understand what was going on.
Yeah.
So I started going to local meetings, and Maya Hahn, who was our local Michigan for Vaccine Choice representative in West Michigan, was like, I got you, and like scheduled all these events. And as I'm doing this, parents are coming to me, what's wrong with my child? What do you think will help? I tried this, I tried that, this didn't work, that didn't work. And like one of the things, like I didn't understand how MMR could be causing injury. I just didn't understand it. So I kept having, this was scientists do, I kept having more and more and more questions. And as I had more and more and more questions, I couldn't let it go. I just had to keep researching.
Yeah.
And of course, I was able to integrate all that information much quicker than someone who didn't have my background, right?
Yeah.
So my heart is to really get at the root causes of the vaccine injury so we know what's happening, but also so that we can try to recover many of the people with these injuries, whether they're children or adults or whatever, and at least give them a better quality of life.
Right.
And we really, because it's really complicated. Every vaccine is different. So you need to kind of have an idea of what's going on before you can really sometimes address it.
Yeah. And so what year did this kind of journey begin for you?
So gosh, I mean, that was probably, I went to graduate school in 1992. I think Andy Wakefield, that was probably 1995, 1996. But again, I continued with my life, right?
Yeah.
So I taught from about 2005 to 2009. And I remember telling my students in high school, I taught high school, this is going to be the issue of our day. I had no idea how big this was going to be. I assumed that if enough children got injured, this would be addressed.
Yeah.
And so to be here 30 years later,
Yeah.
and this has not been addressed is heartbreaking at the deepest level.
And I can only imagine the amount of parents that, especially like you said, the internet wasn't what it is today. And I think parents are probably just now feeling like if there's a vaccine injury in their kid, there's some connections or some people they can talk to or research out there. But even then, it's I would say it's just now becoming not not a taboo topic where people are willing to talk about it. So I can only imagine what it would have been like for the parents who are like, something happened to my kid. They were fine one day, not fine the next, and the doctors kept saying there's some no, we that's not what caused it. All these different things, and they just have this sense, and they don't have any place to turn, and the people
And
that turn don't validate it or don't even make them sound crazy, you know?
right. And as a scientist, I'm very different than a doctor because as a scientist, you're trained to ask questions. And
Yeah,
so when these parents are coming forward, it gave me a lot of questions. And I know how much we didn't know. So I didn't have some blunt. I was like, that's really interesting. I saw my job is to see if there was mechanism. And
yeah,
knowing how much we don't know about the immune system, I didn't assume there wasn't mechanism. I assumed that something was going on and it was our job to figure out what it was.
yeah.
So because of these heartbroken parents, were being gaslighted, that is what called me into the space,
Okay.
to defend these parents and say, wait a minute, like I'm an expert in this field and there is plausible mechanism,
Yeah,
you know?
for sure. And is that what inspired you to start your organization, the Vaccine Injury Treatment Alliance? Is that what kind of is the motivation behind all this?
Yes, the Vaccine Injury Teaching Alliance,
Oh, cheating.
just
I'm
because
sorry.
we don't want them to be like, you're
Yeah.
trying to treat people,
Yeah.
but it's to teach parents about the vaccines. But it's all chronic illness, right? Because there's many adults that have chronic illness from the food, the glyphosate, around it, whatever, everything, right?
Yeah.
But yes, because I really wanted to give everybody everything that I've learned. And
Yeah.
I'm a teacher. So I went from having a PhD in cellular molecular biology to teaching high school and teaching
Yeah.
middle school students. And so I really feel that God gave me a gift. And
Mm.
I don't even know if it's a gift. In order to break something down, you really have to understand it. So what I found is that many of these sites for different states will put information online, but they'd be afraid to summarize it, to simplify it, because they'd be afraid if they did, they would get the science wrong.
Mm.
And so they would just like sort of copy things. And
Yeah.
you'd read it and be like, what does that mean? Like, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like all this gobbledygook and fancy words and like science, chemicals and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so like the parents would be, they're just willing to do anything to recover their kids. So they're trying to make sense of it. And I was like, okay, somebody has to help these people make sense of this, right?
Yeah.
And so, I'm very confident because when I understand something, I'm like, here's what's going on. Let me explain it to you in layman's terms. And I remember when COVID came out, Michael Yeadon, who had worked for Pfizer, I believe, in the UK, I gave this testimony in front of the Michigan House about the COVID vaccines and DTaP and the flu, that they didn't prevent transmission. And he emailed me afterwards. Someone had forwarded an email and said, that line between making sure you're understood and getting the science right is really hard to do,
Mm.
because you have to be simple enough to be understood, but you can't
Yeah.
oversimplify to the fact where you get the science wrong.
Mm.
And that is always my goal. And so I do feel that that's my gift. And that's what I want to give parents, an understanding that has all the science, that has the mechanism, has all of the citations fully referenced. There is mechanism. Let's stop the gaslighting and give them the information that they need so they can understand. And this is not just for parents, but for parents to send the link to medical professionals who will be like, oh my gosh, I was told there was no information on this. And
Yeah.
look, there's hundreds of references.
And that's what's interesting is when I first my son was my firstborn was born in 2020. So right at the height of COVID, I out of the get-go was skeptical, never got the COVID vaccine, but when it came to the standard vaccines, I was open to it. And then I started question on after his first visit, just naturally question like, here we are, they have you on this conveyor belt of get these things. Then I was like, wait, what's happening at 2 months? I was
What is that, right? Like, what
yeah,
is that?
what's going
Mhm.
on? And I remember the doctor was really pushy and he handed me this like paper of, oh, here's all your concerns for the next round. You can research it ahead of time if you feel, it was this one paper. And then now that I've actually learned about, vaccines and how they talk about you can look up these vaccine inserts. When I
Mhm.
look up a vaccine insert, it's nothing compared to what this person gave me. It was an oversimplified, everything. And I just remember questioning, I think it was the rotavirus one. They said, basically the description of it on the simple paper, it was like, even if my kid gets this isn't that big of a deal. And they pretty much said everybody gets it. And I'm like, so why do I need a vaccine? They're like, oh, well, it could still lead to a hospitalization. And anytime you're in the hospital, that's not good. I'm like,
Mhm.
that doesn't, make sense. So that being said, when people start to go down this rabbit hole, they want to learn about it. They should ask for, is it vaccine inserts? Will the doctor even give it to them? Where do they find these? If they want to get
Yeah,
into
generally, a lot of times the doctor isn't going to give it to them. If they're giving the vaccine, technically by law, I believe they have to make that available, but
okay,
most people don't ask for it. And then they're probably going to try to give you that sheet first, but then you have to say, no, give me the vaccine insert. And I don't know, I have some, but I have to dig them out.
I
But
think
like, you open them and they're like in 2-point font and there's a sheet this big and it's covered, but you can go online on VITA. I have links to all of the vaccine inserts to the site where you can get to those. And sometimes the government changes, so I have to update those links. But there are online links to all of them. But, I have a page for every single vaccine on the childhood schedule on VITA. And I research every single one. And so not only do I go to the vaccine insert, whatever they reference, then I go to that. Then I go beyond that to try to figure out what did those studies show? What did they, because they're only going to present the information that is most positive towards them for the most part, right?
right.
So it's really a deep dive. And then I have to backtrack and say, how do I explain this in layman's terms, or what is worth explaining about this, right? So there's a lot. I have thousands and thousands. I've been researching this probably since about 2015, 2016, 20
Yeah.
plus hours a week.
Yeah.
So, people are like, there's no information on X, because and like always, I have all these questions and I'm like, oh, when am I ever going to get to research that question? You know what I mean? Because it's not just on the vaccines, it's also on health recovery. So like, how do we heal our gut and like things like that. But
Sure.
even just on the vaccines, there's a lot of questions So when we did the COVID vaccine, I remember the insert was blank. It says intentionally left blank. And I remember I was actually doing a live event, and it was also being streamed online. And someone came up with, they got it from the pharmacy, like somebody knows someone who works at the pharmacy. That's the best way to get them. Like a friend of yours works at the pharmacy and just ask for it, or they keep them for you. And they came up and undid it, and it was blank. And I was on the stage with Naomi Wolf and some other people, and my jaw just dropped. Like, how can they do that?
Paper, like there was nothing, like
There's
literally
nothing on it except for one little sentence that said intentionally left blank.
Oh my gosh. That should have been the headline of the news of the time. Like that is they're like, yeah, we're going to inject the majority of the country with this, but we're not going to give you anything about it medically.
Nothing, not what's in it, not, the first clinical trial, like nothing, not one word about it are we going to give you. And since it was on an emergency use authorization, they didn't have to.
That should have been more aware. You shouldn't have to be in the know to know that. That should have been everybody.
Right. And of course, we were shouting it from the rooftops, but we were totally censored. So
right. I know. I remember everything you posted. I was posting this. I'm sure you know the guy, the vaccine friendly child plan. That
yes,
book.
Dr. Paul
And
Tunney.
all I did was post a picture of the book on a story, and it got the little caption. Like it didn't even say anything with it. I just said I'm reading this or something, and it saw the word vaccine in the picture, and so it got, it was a crazy time, and I still feel like we're going through it in some way, but
yeah, the censorship is less, but it still is there, like on my accounts and everything. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So would you say that the number of vaccines have been increasing? I mean, we always see these things that, my mother-in-law, she says when she had my husband, he got 8 vaccines or 15, whatever it is. Now we're at 72. But then I hear people say, well, it hasn't really increased. It's just the amount of boosters that we're giving. What would you say?
How is that not an increase?
Yeah.
But no, it has. It used to be MMR and DTaP for the most part, right? Then they added polio, and some people had polio vaccine before, different ones. But and now, they've added, like, they want you to get the flu shot every year. And like, I remember when I went to research it in 2009, when we adopted our children, I was like, what are all of these? RSV, rotavirus, hepatitis B, hepatitis A, and of course they've added the chickenpox to it. And so there were all of these pneumonia, the pneumonia ones for children, for adolescents, HPV, meningitis. Like, what are all of these, and what kind of vaccines are? What do they do in the body? And I think that that's where there's the most misinformation, because we are all like, we have this mythology about vaccines from the first vaccines, like measles and even chickenpox, which are live viral vaccines and produce long-lasting immunity because they are live viruses. And so, yeah, if you get the chickenpox vaccine and the measles vaccine, you're not going to, unless you're immunocompromised, you're not going to get measles or chickenpox, assuming the vaccine takes, which is not always the case, right? If they've been given too early. But most of these other vaccines are subunit vaccines, and the immunity that they produce can last from 3 months to maybe 2 years.
Yeah.
And they dysregulate the immune system in very, very complex and scary ways, such that Peter Abbey, who is a vaccinologist in Africa, found that when these subunit vaccines are given, they increase overall mortality. The DTP vaccine, the old DTP, which isn't used here anymore, but is still used in Africa, increased mortality by 12 times in infant girls.
Wow.
When they added a live virus vaccine, they used the oral polio vaccine, which is a live virus. It's not live here in the US. This is in Africa. It actually did rescue. It reduced mortality because it trained the immune system in a natural way, being a live virus.
Okay.
So this just to say that vaccine science is very complicated.
Yeah.
And different types of vaccines are different. And that's why I have a section on my page. I have a section for the subunit vaccines. I have a section for the DTaP, diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis, because they're a particular kind of vaccine and they don't prevent transmission. And I have a section for the live viral vaccines, because you need to understand what kind of vaccine it is to understand the risk benefit. So like getting, let's say you got a chickenpox vaccine, it's going to prevent you from getting chickenpox, but it's going to increase the likelihood you get shingles later. But at the same time, at least you're not going to get chickenpox. It does kind of what it says it's going to do, right?
Yeah.
But something like, the hepatitis A vaccine or the hepatitis B vaccine, some of these subunit vaccines are actually not giving immunity for very long. And like meningitis is a life-threatening disease, but the meningitis vaccines wear off very quickly. And the truth is, most boosters don't work. So when your child gets more than one vaccine, like, you go in for the schedule and you get the same vaccine like 3 different times, right?
Yeah.
Like 2 months, 4 months, 6 months. The reason is because it just doesn't take the first time.
Wow.
So that's why what you'll see is like, they'll want you to get like 3 DTaP vaccines in the first year of life or something like that, maybe even more. I don't know what the current schedule is. But if you don't do it in that time, usually if you wait till like you're 3, the child's 3, they'll say you only need 1 or maybe 2, like 1 when they're 3 and 1 before school starts or something. Yeah. And the reason is, the older the child is, the more their immune system is competent to handle that vaccine and actually generate immunity. Mm-hmm. And so the reason they give like the DTaP vaccine at 2 months is because pertussis can be life-threatening in infants, right? Wow. So you kind of understand it with that one, but with some of the other ones, like hepatitis B, which is
I was gonna ask.
Drug users, right? Like if you're sexually active or whatever.
I just can't understand. Is there any argument that should be given to a 1-2-day-old baby? Like I can't.
The argument is that apparently prostitutes and drug users didn't take the vaccine, and they needed to recover their research and development money. So they needed a target audience.
Heard,
yeah. And your newborn was that target audience. No, there is no reason.
If
no reason at all.
To have hepatitis B, would there then be a reason? Or even in that case, is there
probably not, because the mom is actually going to give the baby antibodies to it. Point. So I don't even know that argument is valid. I mean, I haven't looked into it in depth because it would be such a small percentage of the population. But even then, I don't think it would actually work the way they're saying it will work.
And then I always thought too, I've had 3 kids. I'm like, I have so much blood work done when I'm pregnant. If that's really a concern, why don't they just see if I have the disease?
They do. So they would know.
So then you're like, okay, well, this one mother has it. There's an argument for that kid to have the vaccine.
Mm-hmm.
But to just everybody blindly gets this vaccination, it doesn't. I saw this. I was looking up arguments, and there was this lady on this. It was some sort of television show, and she was sitting in the audience, the expert, and they're like, why should we give that vaccine to babies? And she was like, it's the most undervalued vaccine. You can get cancer and all these things. But I'm like, but how do you even get the hepatitis B? Let's talk about how somebody would be at risk for this.
Yeah.
It was just completely overlooked. It was like, well, you wouldn't want to get that because it can lead to cancer. Well, sure, but I'm not.
But no, but I don't have it, so I can't
Yeah.
transmit it to my child if I don't have it. Are they going drinking, partying, indiscriminate sex on the first day of birth? I mean, what are we doing here?
If you feel like there's an issue with it, you should probably wait till they're at the age. So yeah, and then that being said, what about the vitamin K shot? Do you have any information about this? Because that one, I know it's not technically a vaccine, but
Right. I have done a deep dive into those, and I need to
okay.
collate that information to put on the website because many people are interested in it. It can be very, very problematic. The idea that we need to thicken blood, like we're designed by our creator a certain way. So that should raise some red flags right there. Now, and so there are stem cells that need to travel throughout the body. So there's some argument for not getting it. You can do more natural sources. The mother can do more natural sources during pregnancy. So this is where we have to educate ourselves and educate each other. And they're complicated issues. So it's not, there's always a risk benefit or whatever. And if a child is at risk for bleeding or whatever, then, it's just, the problem is there's not enough studies because they make all the assumptions, right?
Yeah.
And those assumptions aren't necessarily true. And so it's like you have to question all the assumptions, and no one's doing the research, so you can't really say for sure because they haven't looked at it, right?
Yeah.
So I would say it can be problematic. And I think more so in an environment where their gut's been destroyed, their microbiome's been destroyed. Our infants are born with 250 plus chemicals in their system already. So we are already at the threshold of our system breaking down. So anything added can potentially cause that threshold to spiral.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, what's the hill you want to die on? A lot of times if you start questioning everything, they'll be like, oh, they're an anti-vax parent. We better steal the kid when they're not looking and go inject them. And I know people that's happened to. Well, they'll give them the hepatitis B vaccine, even though the parents asked not to have it because they're trying to save the baby or whatever.
I actually had my last daughter was born 4 months ago, and I said no hepatitis B, no vitamin K. And literally minutes after she came out of me, they had to take her, just her color wasn't coming as quick. And I said, we don't want any of these things. I had this pediatrician who I never met in my face, while I just gave birth within seconds, trying to convince me to change my mind on the vitamin K shot. And I'm like, this is not the time. I just kept saying no, but it was that pressure. And I was like, I never met you before. And here you are, literally in my face. I was on the bed. She's over here in my face saying, are you sure you don't want this? And then trying to scare me into all these reasons why we should get it. And that's just, if this stuff is so great, then why do you have to take tactics like that to in somebody's face? And it's like, well, don't you think I showed up here with some sort of research?
No, they think you're a moron. I'm just gonna tell you that right now.
Yeah, it's just, and also trying to catch you at your most vulnerable time to convince you of research that you came in with a sound mind. And I've heard so many people have stories like that happen to them, and that's where, so the really amazing I want to talk to you today is talk about SIDS and this relationship to vaccines. With my first son born, I was so afraid of co-sleeping, and I'm now kind of more, I'm definitely my third child I'm co-sleeping more consistently with, and that's something else I'd like to talk about with another expert, but just the value of maybe co-sleeping in general and the health benefits of that. But the pediatrician would scare me so much that SIDS is directly related to the child sleeping in the bed with you. That's a side of suffocation. Then I start to research all these stories of where people just put their baby in the crib as they were instructed to do, no reason the child should suffocate on their back. and they go and check, and their baby's just,
Gone.
gone. And that, especially it's, as a mother reading that, that's your worst nightmare. And especially when you do everything they tell you to do and it still happens. And then I hear these stories when that happens, they're like, I did everything you said. Why did this happen? They say, then they start to still blame the parents. Like, oh, you must have actually had a blanket in there. It's just like, well, no, there was nothing. I didn't do anything. And so
And
now,
then it's even worse because I had a case that someone referred me to that the child did not die. The child had a brain bleed, a spinal column bleed, retinal bleeds. And then they wanted to prosecute someone for shaken baby syndrome. There was not a mark on this baby. The parents did not believe the caretaker injured the baby. He had gotten a 6-in-1 vaccine and 2 other vaccines 3 weeks to the day before this incident. He immediately developed respiratory issues. And days before, he started vomiting and having lethargy and peaking of fever. And then, this child just crashed. And of course, 911 was called right away. And the thing is, the aunt reached out to me on Facebook. Yeah. And I don't even remember counseling her this because, obviously it's traumatic for me even just to hear about it. Yeah. And they were saying this child is going to, be drooling for the rest of their life, right? Like catastrophic brain injury, everything else, that there's no expectation that this child is going to have any kind of a normal life. And I said, is the mother nursing? And I've sent this to someone else before. And they said, yes. As soon as they were past the absolute critical time that the baby could nurse. And I said, if that mother takes vitamin C, vitamin D, zinc, that is going to help that child's immune system and give them the antioxidant reserves to recover. Okay. And the aunt sent me a picture a year later of this little baby playing, looking completely normal. Of course, they haven't measured every parameter, but when you thought that they were going to be like laying there, not able to do anything, in a vegetative state or something. And to show that this is a biochemical inflammation, this is a biochemical crisis. And if you mediate it with the right things, it is recoverable. The longer you don't remediate it, the more permanent damage is going to be done. Okay. And so this is where if our doctors were able to do a cytokine panel and measured what's going on with the immune system, like if they had done that, they would have known this child was probably septic. They could have used, and I'm not, especially in acute cases, I'm not against using pharmaceuticals. They could have used an interleukin-6 blocker and shut down that sepsis right away for a child that might die, we're talking about, right? Yeah. And so there are immune markers that if they check for, they would be like, oh, this child's going septic. And that is exactly what is happening in a lot of these SIDS cases.
And are they going septic because of vaccines, or are they going septic just naturally?
So let me explain what sepsis is. I remember watching The Little House on the Prairie with Michael Landon, and Ma cuts herself. And then 3 days later, her leg has this raging infection, but everybody else has gone off to the fair or something like that. And can she drain, cut the infection open and drain it before she, dies or something? So that is the traditional understanding of sepsis, where you have an infection from a wound that typically would happen during war, or it could be because you just have a really bad bacterial infection. Okay. And when that infection gets so bad, and a lot of times it was like, from a wound or something, an acute infection, it goes systemic in your blood, and it causes such a profound immune activation that the body cannot handle it. It's like overimmune activation. And your immune system actually just goes haywire, and your organs start shutting down, and you die. And it's very hard to recover from, because what do you do, right? Some sort of alternative practitioners have used vitamin C, high-dose vitamin C in the past, even for these bacterial infections and things, with some good result. But that's not typically, we just give antibiotics for that. But if it's not a bacteria, the antibiotics wouldn't work. So here are some studies which really set me, and I want to credit Neil Miller for his book on 400 critical vaccine studies, which I, have like a Bible on every page bookmarked, for starting me on this trail. there were these premature infants who are already really, really susceptible to inflammation, to apnea, which is when they stop breathing, and to cardiorespiratory events because they're just very vulnerable. But they vaccinate them anyway. So it would get to the point where the nurse would actually put the crash cart right next to the infant because they would know they would crash.
Wow.
And stop breathing, or their heart would stop after these vaccinations. So finally, some of these doctors and probably other scientists asked, well, so they would think this was sepsis. They would think this baby's probably really susceptible to a bacterial infection, but a lot of the time they would check and they could never find any bacteria that would be the cause of the sepsis. They would check the immune markers, and the baby was going septic, but there was no bacterial infection. But most of the time the doctor would be like, well, we just must have missed it. But finally someone's like, well, vaccines are supposed to activate the immune system, and some of these kids are getting like 6 vaccines. What if the vaccines are causing the kid to go septic? So they checked, and in fact, that's exactly what they found. They found the inflammatory markers such as interleukin 6 and C-reactive protein and ferritin, all of these that are showing that the immune system is going off the rails, just skyrocketed in many of these babies. And it was coincident with them stopping breathing, that their heart would stop. Then another study actually went a step further and actually was measuring the brain inflammation. And what they found was that following vaccination, specifically interleukin 1 beta and prostaglandins, were causing infiltration of the immune system into the brain. It was causing brain inflammation. And the apnea, which is the child stopping breathing, and the cardiorespiratory arrest, or their heart stopping beating, was actually an early sign of the baby going septic, because they are so vulnerable that brain inflammation could cause their breathing and their heart rate to shut down even before they fully went septic, which is the total immune dysregulation where the other organs start shutting down.
Wow.
So we actually have, and I have this little flyer that I just made up as a result of all the research that I did for that. And all that, if you go on my website, go to the childhood page, go to mechanism of injury, and then there's one on SIDS, VIDS, and brain bleeds. Yeah. And so the other thing is, you have like a reserve of antioxidants. So like glutathione is the body's master antioxidant, but vitamin C can help to restore glutathione levels, and it also kind of acts as an antioxidant on its own. So a tiny baby, like a premature infant, is going to have very, very low antioxidant reserves. And so vaccination is probably going to cause an acute, very quick response. And, we haven't said this before, but to 70 to 97% of SIDS cases happen immediately post-vaccination.
And isn't there
within 7 to 10 days?
Yeah, you said 10 days, is that right?
And there's another, like this child who had a brain bleed at 3 weeks. So I think many times in the older infants, they have stronger reserves of antioxidants like glutathione, but it keeps being depleted. And here's where like 1 dose of vitamin C, like you can get sodium ascorbate that's powdered, could give the body the recovery that it needs to get above that, because that inflammation, you're hyper-inflaming the immune system. If vitamin D is low, if zinc is low, if your antioxidant supplies are low, or if the chronic inflammation depletes them over time, then that baby is going to at some point crash. So I had a family member who I saw on Facebook kept going into the ER with respiratory distress for her 2 to 3 month old infant. So I'm putting this together in my mind. Yeah. And like within a month, she'd been into the ER 5 times. Wow. Every time they're telling her that this baby has another respiratory infection. When your immune cells are highly inflamed, just like with COVID, they actually degranulate, which means they bust open and they flood the system with inflammatory cytokines. And this causes an extreme inflammation in the lungs that looks like a respiratory infection. Now, when your lungs are that inflamed, it can predispose to a secondary bacterial infection. It certainly can. But many times it really is the lack of antioxidants and the lack of vitamin D and zinc that help the immune system to turn it back down
Wow.
that are missing. And so I reached out to her. I said, again, are you nursing? Hey, why don't you just take a vitamin C, some D, some zinc? Your body's going to give the baby what it needs.
So vitamin C, D, and zinc is what you recommended. Is that right?
Right. And
Okay.
that's, that's acutely, not like for the rest of your life. Vitamin C probably ain't going to hurt anything. D and zinc, you want to work with a healthcare practitioner to make sure you're supplementing the right amount. But I mean, if you're talking about an acute thing, your body is going to give the baby what it needs, right, through that breast milk.
Mm.
And so, and she never went back into the hospital.
Wow.
I mean, she was literally in there for 4 days, home for 3, back in,
Yeah.
and I saw it as a depletion of that baby's antioxidants. And I was afraid that the baby was going to crash, right?
Yeah.
It was going to get so depleted by these repeated, like the infections, the inflammation. And she probably didn't have enough reserves to give through the breast milk, right?
Yeah.
So, or the baby gets so lethargic, they stop breastfeeding. So when your antioxidant reserves are so low, the first sign is probably going to be respiratory distress, as it was in the child with the brain bleed. A week after vaccination, he starts with a respiratory distress. They say it's an infection. They go back to see how the respiratory issues are doing, and they're just still lingering. And then the child starts vomiting for no reason. And then peaks of fever here and there, and then is lethargic for no reason. And then the next day has a brain bleed. So it's well known back in the day when scurvy was a thing and people didn't have enough vitamin C. If you had an acute depletion of vitamin C, which we don't typically see in our society, except for in these cases where you have this hyperinflammation that just depletes your stores, the bones, at the ends of the bones, it's called the epiphyseal plate, would actually bleed. The brain would bleed. The spinal column would bleed. So acute scurvy actually was known to lead to this internal bleeding. And we've lost that knowledge. And so now we say, well, they must have been a shaken baby. There must have been some abuse, even though there's not a mark on the exterior of the baby's body, and they can even have their bones break because collagen formation, which forms your bones, which forms your collagen, and your epiphyseal plate is the interaction of collagen with the bone.
Yeah.
So collagen production actually absolutely needs vitamin C. So when you deplete vitamin C, that whole system just breaks down, and then the blood vessels break down, and you get bleeds at all of those interfaces.
Wow.
So there's so much that we have just been ignoring. But in the end, like with these premature babies, that's where they have the clearest data. But like the premature babies, at least still in the hospital, if you have a low birth weight baby or maybe a normal birth weight baby, but for whatever reasons, they're already a little bit inflammatory or they're depleted or their gut microbiome isn't optimal, and you vaccinate them, who's there to monitor their heart rate, their apnea when they start to go septic? And then I've never known anyone to take cytokine panels when they bring them into the hospital. They might act like it's an allergic reaction or they don't know, but very few of them act like it's a case of sepsis.
Wow.
Because they could absolutely shut that down. We have the technology. We could have saved all of these children, or so many of them.
Yeah. And it just seems like they're not connecting the dots. And why is it that it just sounds like there's a disconnect. They're not understanding that it's sepsis that's causing this, and maybe they just think it's a genetic.
Well, first of all, now they have changed the definition of sepsis. It used to be bacterial, but now they understand that it's just a gross dysfunction of the immune system, a hyperinflammation of the immune system, and it can be caused by other things, which we never saw that in the past because we didn't have all these weird things activating our immune systems. But yeah, they are so unversed in this. And this is where doctors are just taught what they're taught.
Yeah.
Scientists are very different because we're taught to look for root causes and to ask questions. And so you will get some doctors that ask questions, but in an acute, they might be asking the question in their mind, but they're only treating you according to the normal standard of care. And then, of course, they may be affected by that and start thinking about it long term, but that's probably not going to affect how they treat your child.
Yeah.
And, in point of fact, they're more likely to exit the system than to start treating children differently, because they're going to have to fight everybody on their staff to treat the child differently.
Yeah, it just seems like the medical system trains doctors to think very linear, and this is what you're supposed to do, and go outside the norms. And then that's why when you come to them as a parent or patient and give them any pushback, they don't even know what to do with it. And then you're getting so much confrontation for even suggesting thinking outside the box, thinking of different options, and I just feel like once I became a parent, that's when I was like, okay, now I started to question their their process and not just blindly accept whatever they were telling me.
Well, I know, because our children are so much more important to us than even ourselves, right?
Oh yeah, you actually.
And so it really changes your whole perspective. And then when you realize you've been kind of lied to, and the doctors have too, like everybody, like I didn't. So like when I went to graduate school, I didn't know vaccines had aluminum in them. I didn't know, like I knew enough of the parts and pieces so that when I learned the information, I put it all together really, really quickly. But nobody like discreetly taught us about that. We had to go educate ourselves. I'm able to discern truth from fiction. Like you have a lot of people online talking about stuff. I'm like, yeah, there's no basis in that. Or to look it up very quickly and go, whatever.
Yeah.
But we weren't really taught. Like I was taught that simian virus 40, SV40, was the prototypical cancer-causing virus. Not that everyone has it will get cancer, but it promotes cancer.
Okay.
I never was told that it was isolated from the polio vaccine. Like I would have had to take a step and do my own research, which I finally did, and pulled up the scientific papers, which are right there in plain sight.
So you're saying that it's in the polio vaccine, and can you receive this naturally, or is this just because of people getting the vaccine that they receive that cancer?
So yeah, let me clarify this. So this was originally when the two Sabine and Salk polio vaccines came out in the 1950s.
Okay.
They were grown on monkey kidney cells, and in Africa they were grown on chimpanzee kidney cells and monkey kidney cells as well. And so they were grown on a particular monkey kidney cell called a Vero cell, and those had so the kidneys don't have viral defenses, because if you want to grow a virus, you can't grow it on cells that are going to destroy it.
Yeah.
And so they had to grow them on these kidney cells that lacked viral defenses. So if they have no viral defenses, there were monkey viruses in them.
Yeah.
In fact, SV40 is named 40 because it was the 40th animal virus that they pulled out of the cell line. The 40th one. So when they grew the polio, it's a virus, on these to use as a vaccine, they turned it into the vaccine, which was a live virus, and they injected it into hamsters, and the hamsters grew all these tumors. And they immediately went, oh, well, it's probably one of those monkey viruses that were in the cells. They knew.
Wow.
And I thought, we don't think this is going to be a problem for humans, so we're just going to go inject or give the sugar pill to everybody. So it turns out the people who got the sugar pill, your gut is used to dealing with viruses, so they were less likely to have problems. But the people who were injected, it was supposed to be dead, killed, but in some of them, the virus wasn't completely inactivated. So they got SV40. And this SV40 is highly associated with about 10 different types of cancers. And those people could then spread that to their children, to their mates. Like, it hasn't been looked at in depth, but it's now endemic in the human population at a low level. But these tissues, like there are tissues that the non-tumorigenic tissues in the body doesn't have this virus, and the ones that are part of the tumor does have the virus, because where that virus is active, it promotes cancer. So
this would only be, if I'm understanding you correctly, this would only be in humans because of the trace back to vaccinations and your ancestors getting that polio vaccine.
Exactly. Yes.
And that's insane. So there's basically a cancer causing
monkey virus.
Monkey virus that would.
And you have heard of RSV as a new mom, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That is another monkey virus that came from growing vaccines on those cells that was spread to humans. So before the vaccine program, that virus came directly from the vaccine program through these monkey kidney cells that they grow the vaccine viruses on, and it was spread to humans. Because I remember, like, when I was a kid, nobody had heard of RSV, and then all of a sudden RSV, and it can be deadly in infants, which is true, It's a monkey virus.
So they're basically creating the problem, and then they're creating a solution per se with a vaccine.
That's even worse than the problem.
Like, it's just, oh, wow, what a good business strategy. I guess just create problems and then create things to solve the problems that make it worse, and then probably create another solution for that created problem. Oh my gosh. That, yeah, definitely have not heard that one. And oh my gosh, it just opens your brain is blown when you hear this kind of stuff. And let's go back to the breast milk. I was listening to one of your talks, and another time my mind was blown away by something you were saying. And you talked about how breast milk was anti-inflammatory, and how that can help babies with, like you mentioned, with mothers taking the vitamin C, D, and was it zinc or iron? I forget. It was
Zinc.
So, and then the mother in your previous story was taking this, and that's how the baby received what they needed to get past the probably
The
heavy,
crisis.
yeah, the crisis, the inflammation. But you said something really interesting. I was going to ask you to expand on it. That the when the mother kisses the baby, they take in the mother's body instinctively knows what the baby needs, and then creates. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah. So on an immunological level, so breast milk is a complex fluid, very akin to blood.
Mm.
It actually incorporates bacteria from the microbiome, and it does it in a staged way so that it creates the microbiome of the child with specific bacteria in a specific chronological progression. It also has many peptides that actually are antibacterial. So it has all of these compounds. It also has many immune signaling molecules, and you make antibodies. So, like when you're exposed to a virus, right, your body makes antibodies. So, if you're in the same environment as your infant, you are actually going to give those antibodies to your baby. But think about how many times we're kissing our babies and we're changing their diapers. We are totally exposed to every microbe they're exposed to, right? They're sucking on our breast and we're getting, so our body detects whatever could be a threat to our infant and then makes antibodies and other immune signaling molecules and sends it through the breast milk.
Oh my gosh. That's
So
amazing.
it's really also really important because we know over many, many, many studies that children who are breastfed are much, much less likely to get a bacterial infection. So
Wow.
remember, tetanus, pertussis, diphtheria are all bacterial. So is meningitis.
Mm.
So is pneumonia. The infant body is not responsive to bacteria. And the reason is because when you mount that immune response, remember I said you could go septic or whatever if you have a really bad infection.
Yeah.
The infant brain needs to be in an anti-inflammatory state for proper brain development. It needs to be in an anti-inflammatory state. So that's why children who are exposed during a critical window get autism. If they're exposed later, they may develop all kinds of other problems, gut issues, maybe even some sensory things or whatever, but typically they are not autistic if their brain is more fully developed.
Mm.
Okay. So that's why vaccines shouldn't even really be thought of unless it's absolutely critical until after like 3 years old.
Yeah.
Because the brain is still developing. The breast milk is designed to keep that brain in an anti-inflammatory state to neutralize those bacteria before they become a problem. And
Wow.
so we know through many, many studies that infants that are breastfed hardly ever get bacterial infections.
So that just tells me breast milk is, and I know I've been told it's always the best thing you can do is if you can breastfeed your kid. So breast milk is really not just a superior quality for general babies. It's really a relationship between the baby and the mother, and creating a unique formula that the baby particularly needs. So
Right.
while it might be good to, freeze your breast milk and donate it to somebody who needs it, and that's probably maybe superior to formula, it's not going to be maybe as beneficial for kids that you're not directly raising. Is that
Right, but you're not, because the mom is always getting that feedback from the infant, and your breast milk will concentrate vitamin C like up till 6 times. So that's why we talk about mom being depleted. Yeah, your breast milk is getting feedback probably in ways we haven't even studied and don't understand. So obviously, if you have to use donor milk, it's because it's not just food, it is all of these different immune signaling molecules. It's still going to be superior, like way, way superior, but your milk when you're interacting with the child is going to be even more superior in terms of immunologically making sure that that infant is doing well.
That is, I wish they would tell mothers this, because there's a lot of mothers that struggle with breastfeeding. And I think that for me, for my first two, I had to do exclusive pumping with them. But I wish that I had been told this, because it just keeps that
Motivation.
motivation. You understand the importance, and not being told, oh, it's good, but if you struggle, formula is just fine. We need
And
to.
it's not just fine because it's not just food.
Mm,
It's your microbiome, it's your immune components, it's
yeah,
that anti-inflammatory state. Because the thing is, so when they did a study, they showed that children who were breastfed, it reduced their chances of a vaccine injury by like half, like more than half. So it cut it in half.
yeah.
So like if it were like 12 times more likely to have a vaccine injury, now it was only 6 times.
Wow.
So that is the power, that anti-inflammatory power. Now, of course, it's still the vaccines that's doing it. So like, do you know what I mean? But like
So,
the protective power of breast milk was enormous in terms of keeping that baby's infant's brain in an anti-inflammatory state.
okay. And would you say that's what I hear about? It's the heavy metals, and then the heavy metals get in the blood-brain barrier. Is is that is inflammation essentially of the brain? What's the root cause of all these illness like SIDS and autism? Is that what it is? It's the brain's actually getting inflamed?
Well, there's 2 things. So one, it's first the immune system, and that inflammation goes systemic. Then there are immune cells in the brain. And so, like with the aluminum containing vaccines, your immune cells actually eat that aluminum. They don't know what to do with it. They know it's not supposed to be there. And then, if the brain becomes inflamed, which it almost always does after vaccination, I want to say it always does, probably. We've known that
Uh,
to some degree or another. It's just normal, right? It's just the degree and whether the body can shut it down. Those immune cells will flood the brain and dump their aluminum in there, and the immune cells, and once they do that, the immune cells go haywire in the brain. So a lot of these conditions are caused by immune cells going haywire in the brain, but they may also be going haywire in the rest of the body. So you may see things like eczema, and I can't tell you how many parents are like, ear infections is a big one. So it inflames a lot of different systems in the body. And then the baby's screaming because their brain's on fire, and we just think that's normal nowadays.
yeah, yeah. We just what they say, it's called the baby's colicky, and it's basically unexplained discomfort. That's all that is.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, the gut is really central to this, the vagus nerve there. And that's what I do. I mean, like, as you see, like, we've been talking an hour and we could talk like 6 more,
yeah,
you know.
so many different tangents too.
Yeah, which is why I did launch the website, and I have webinars, and they're typically like, I think people are like, I want people to realize, like, when I do a webinar, it's the question I'm asking, it's a question I'm interested in.
Mm.
And so it's almost always going to be at the cutting edge. It's almost going to be state of the art or so foundational that everyone needs to know it. Like, I'm not just throwing stuff out there to get hits, to get likes, I used all my own money to start it, to make money off of people. And so if people realize how deeply I want to understand these questions, they'd be like, whatever you come out with, I want to watch it, because it's going to be something that is critical for you to know or that you didn't know.
Yeah. And so can you expand on what it is that your organization does, and how people can find value through it? Because I know that I go on your website, and there's any vaccine related, like you just said, anything you want to know about vaccines, it seems to be on your website, and it's amazing. Any question you have. So what is it that your goal is, and how have people been changed by what you're doing? Have you heard stories? I'm sure you've heard lots of stories.
Yeah. And, I deal with a lot of people one-on-one too. And like, if people reach out to me, like, I have a hard time turning away. I'm trying to find a happy medium there, because I can't, like, I don't consult, I don't charge at this point. We'll see how that goes, because I can't handle it all. But one, the free facing pages are all about vaccines, because I want people to have that information. And it's thousands of dollars worth of information. I can't tell you how many thousands of hours of research went into that. And so there's a page on the childhood schedule. Where mine differs is I actually have mechanism of injury, and everything is fully cited. So you can find all the papers, or the key papers, not all, because that would overwhelm people. the key papers for each different topic. And so because the doctors, you go to them, they don't have any clue. And so people have to educate themselves to understand what is all going on here. There's a lot of short videos. I do have on the childhood page an hour and 20-minute video, which is probably what you watched, about vaccines, to kind of just give you an overview. But then there's a page for every single one. Then likewise, there's for the COVID vaccine, including mechanism of injury. There's some other websites. There's like a resources page with all kinds of links to stuff that's censored that makes it easier for you to find that are resources that you might need. Yeah. And book list, things like that. There's a media page, so there's several different free pages. But then behind a very small paywall, it's like $13 a month, because I'm not trying to charge these mothers of vaccine injured children, right?
Very generous.
There is a ton of information. Wow. So we do generally twice a month. I slow down a little during the summer. I give webinars. So we have them on pandas. I want to do one on POTS. I have them on chronic immune activation and how that leads to autoimmune disease and cancer. I have one on cancer. I have one on diabetes. I have one on lipids and cholesterol, because it is actually about chronic disease. So this is where I have a lot of people with autoimmune issues, not just people who are trying to recover their kids, but people with their own issues. And I'm actually thinking of doing a second landing page and really spotlighting that it's about chronic illness, because all of the same things that cause susceptibility to vaccine injury cause susceptibility to autoimmune issues, cause susceptibility to all of these different chronic illnesses that people are getting. And so whether we're talking about like genetic mutations, or MTFR, MTHFR variants, or all of these different things, all of these susceptibilities, or mold exposure, which can lead to autism, all of these things feed into the same funnel. And so people need to know all the parts and pieces. So I may actually end up with another landing page that, because it won't be as censored maybe, that leads to the same pages, but is about chronic illness, because it's all the same thing. It's just that if you are susceptible to chronic illness and you get a vaccine, you're going to have a vaccine injury, because it's a perfect storm kind of a thing. So it's really behind the paywall. It's about health recovery. We have 60 pages of how to raise a healthy family naturally, with links to all the products. And that is the work of Holly Nesbitt, who is just an amazing person and had her own health journey, and so started raising her family. And I used all her, I'm like, oh, let me go see what she says to do for this. Wow. And then she has links to all the products, and they're downloadable. And she has a whole section on detox and how, everything from how to use a nebulizer to how to deal with a fever to how to, lymph detox your child, all of those things. I've spike detox protocols from the best in the world, Dr. Robin Rose. So there's presentations for members. That's all of the presentations that have been given so far, which you'll have access. If you're a member, you can watch them whenever. And whenever we do a presentation, you can be on it and ask questions. It's a Zoom presentation. And then it'll go up a week later onto the website. So you can watch it whenever you're available. But then all of these other pages, and I keep adding more. I'm going to add a nutritional healing page. I'm splicing all of the videos so that in 10-minute sections, so you can just watch the section on cholesterol or statins if that's what you want to watch. You don't have, you know what I mean, have to watch the whole hour and a half. Or after you watch it once, you're like, okay, I want to rewind to this section. And when I look at the views, people always go back and rewatch the videos. So I'll have 92 unique views, because this is members only, and then I'll have 300 views total. So people are going back again and again, or whatever. The videos. So it's an enormous amount of information, which I had to just upgrade the website to hold more content, because there's a lot of videos. So if it takes a minute to load, that's why. But my goal is to have because you watch a podcast and then you can't find it again. Even with a show like The High Wire, I'm like, oh, I remember so-and-so had a podcast on such and such. I can't even find it on YouTube or Rumble, or I go to the High Wire site and they don't catalog them. And so I can't find that information again. So it's basically kind of like a university for people to self-educate about these relevant issues. I have a section on how to prevent respiratory illness, how to treat respiratory illness. So once you go in behind the paywall, go to the menu. I have figuring it all out. What tests do you need to do to see if you've got an autoimmune disorder? What tests do you need to measure to see if you're inflamed? Like
Wow.
I had one person on my website who said, she's like, I went and here's, my blood work. I had my doctor measure my C-reactive protein. He really didn't want to measure it. I'm like, are you kidding me? That's like a total standard thing to measure is C-reactive protein. It's almost like they don't want to know. They say your blood work is normal. They didn't measure anything that needed to be measured,
Yeah.
And that's why people like, they say I'm normal. I'm like, but I think I'm dying, And like,
Here's a pill.
yeah, and so it's like, here's what you need to measure and here's what it tells and this is what it means so that when you go to your doctor, you're educated.
Yeah. And so if somebody feels like what part of your website should they go to particularly if they feel that their child's had some sort of injury in this and they're trying to do that detox? What
I would actually go to healing, where do I begin? That's
oh,
you
perfect
know, yeah.
perfect title.
And because it really talks about, because it is a perfect storm. And I actually, in response, and I respond to what feedback I get back in response to what I was hearing from parents, I'm like, really want to do like yeah, my child is injured. Where do I begin with this childhood injury issue? Like, how do I assess whether it's the gut? How do I know whether maybe it's a reactivated virus? What do I do? You know what I mean? To
Yeah.
take them through those steps
Yeah.
that I'm sometimes doing with friends and family and people that come into my life as I'm helping them navigate. I'm like, okay, everybody needs this. But right now on that healing, where do I begin? Because so much of it is when you go to organic, or gluten free, you're going to maybe notice a huge difference. So it deals with all of those things of reducing your toxic load, making sure your food is clean, making sure your water is clean, making sure your air is clean. And so it talks about those basics. A lot of times people want just one thing. It is almost never one thing. It's a perfect storm of things. Sometimes it's mold in the home, really destroyed the immune system. And it was the key susceptibility factor.
Mm.
Everything else is important too, but until you remediate that mold, both in the environment and in the child or in the family, you're not going to make progress. And that was Holly Nesbitt who put all that information there. That was her story. She almost died from mold exposure. And eventually they moved, but she ended up with SIBO and leaky gut and all these other things.
Yeah, and I would love to talk to her because that's another rabbit hole. And you just think about how people used to live outside, and we lived in shelters, but they weren't this tight, compact homes that are so well insulated. But when you create that insulation, you create, like you're waterproofing your house. You're also once water gets in, you're gonna have trouble getting it out if you even notice it's there, and then that's
Right.
mold.
And
And
I have a couple on mold. I have one on yeast and one on mold that's under presentations for members, right? And as I do those, I'm going to break them down and like put them on specific sections. So right now, all of them are in presentations for members, but I'm putting all the ones on nutrition, like diabetes and fats and stuff. I'm doing a nutritional healing page for that I'll put up. Then
yeah,
the ones on like SIBO and mold, I'll say specific health concerns, mold, blah, 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 blah. So I want to break it down so people can find what they're looking for. But honestly, every single, like, I don't waste time. I'm not just having somebody on to have on.
yeah,
So I really deal with these critical issues. And like one of the things that the people who talked about mold and yeast were talking about is the use of particle board. So houses used to be made out of wood, your cabinets, everything. And now so much is made out of particle board. And you have particle board under your sink, which we know is going to leak at some point in your life,
yeah.
right? One way or another, you're going to get water under your sink.
Oh yeah.
It expands that particle board and it stays moist, and that particle board grows mold like wood would never do. Real
Wow.
wood, like,
Yeah, yeah.
and so there's all of these issues so they were saying even in the desert, people who live in the desert are having these mold problems because
Wow.
all you need is a leak and some particle board and there you go.
So everyone's got to check their sinks. Go check.
I know, like it's so overwhelming. And so my goal of the website is for you to learn a little bit at a time and then be able to go back.
Yes.
And then for healing, where do I begin? Like how to detox your kitchen, how to detox your bathroom, how to detox your beauty products with links to clean ones.
Yeah.
All downloadable PDFs. Like clearly, I'm not trying to make money. Like this should cost you like $1,500 or something.
And even that would be a bargain because you know how many people they just all the medical bills that you can get from one of these.
Exactly.
So,
Mm-hmm.
like we spend a lot of money on organic food. I'm like, well, I'd rather spend it on this than a medical bill down the road. So it's probably still going to be cheaper. And for those that are listening, your website, it's
It's
vi-ta.org. And
Yes,
I'm
vi-ta.org. And like, don't try searching for it, enter it directly. Or you can go to any of my social medias. I'm on Facebook, Christina Parks. I'm on Instagram at Epigenetic Healing. I'm on X. I'm on Telegram.
you're on every.
So yeah, and I post
Yeah.
regularly. I post a lot of informative videos, so you can learn a lot just by going, especially in my Instagram account. I'm super censored on Facebook, so I try posting, and sometimes it makes a dent, sometimes it doesn't. But Instagram, you can go through and see each topic because I put like a little header on it, and then watch those short videos, and all of those have links to, well, not Facebook because Facebook's terrible, but all of them have links to my VITA page. And so again, and you can cancel whenever. Just, you log in, it'll take you to your account page, and then you enter the site to watch stuff. But once you go back to your account page, you can cancel anytime. You're just like, I'm not going to have time for 3 months because I'm going to Europe or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And then come back and sign back up. And because my heart is to provide information that people can access on their health journey. And I can't tell you, like, every single day, like when you've been in this space a long time, you assume people know stuff. And like the other day, a friend of mine was eating sunflower seeds, and I'm like, those are really high in omega-6s.
Yeah.
And then she's like, oh, really? I do feel inflamed whenever I eat a lot of them. And I'm like, so that's why, and we need to hear it, and we need to hear it again and again and again.
It seems like it gets really overwhelming with how many. I just try to take one item in my food at a time, and kind of everything that comes through our door is vetted by me. Now I can't control when we go to a restaurant. I will once in a while. I'm out with the kids and we need some food, so I'll go through a drive-through.
Mm-hmm.
But at least I know what's coming through my door has been heavily vetted. But even then, it's like I thought I was buying this good salt, and then I see this study the other day that I've been buying salt with lead in it. I'm like, what am I supposed to do? But you just got to take one thing at a time. I like what you said. Check your kitchen sink. Check any areas. Go into your house, whatever you have to do, but start just one thing at a time. And that's why I think your website and what you're offering, it has pretty much anything you can look at there. Just pick one topic. I'm going to start detoxing our family from this thing, and your website will be able to guide people on that topic that they
Right,
choose.
exactly. When they're done with that, or if they have a specific health interest, like, we did some on pandas because a lot of people don't understand that. So I'm going to do one on pots. And so, on restoring your gut health or whatever. So, there's always something to learn. So don't think, oh, that doesn't interest me, because it all intersects or it wouldn't be there.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And so one, it's a cumulative, but just take one thing, start there. And then, and I have a page on genetic susceptibilities and on other susceptibilities, the key susceptibilities in people of African descent. Nobody's doing that because we know that the MMR is higher rates of autism in Black boys, right? Yeah. So what's behind that? So, I mean, there's so much information, and that's the idea is I want you to, like, really ideally, you'd be like, okay, every Friday, I'm going to spend 30 minutes watching something on here or making a plan of action.
Yeah.
I'm going to watch this on how to detox my kitchen, like download this PDF, look at that and see, where to go next. Yeah. And some people they've made progress, like the person who took it to her doctor. So when I see people doing that, asking their doctor, getting certain blood tests, starting certain supplements or whatever, taking control of their health, I'm just like, praise God. And it breaks my heart because I can't guarantee that what I'm going to do is going to fix all your problems.
Yeah.
But I can at least give you really good information and a place to start.
And last thing to kind of note on is, and I love it, is you've been mentioning God a lot in this. And I think that's beautiful. My podcast is, Christian based, and I want to always incorporate it in. How do you feel? Like, do you feel that God's led you on this journey? How is, if that's the case, how has he helped your journey and guided you on what you should be doing?
Oh my gosh. Like, I look back now, and you know how you make a decision? Like when I went to graduate school, like you don't know what you're doing. You just kind of go, throw a dart. Okay, I'm going to do this. I mean, it's like in your area of interest, but you're really not sure, like that I ended up in an immunology lab. That wasn't that was just by chance, kind
Yeah.
of,
Yeah.
you know? And like I can see how God, and now I feel like all the parts, I'm in like a harvest season and
Mhm.
all the parts are coming together,
Yeah.
right? Like all of the different things that I've done, even such that like, so I had this young man come and ask me, how can you speak out of the government, like talking about these viruses that are in the vaccines and all of these different things, the COVID vaccines. Like,
Yeah.
how can you do this? And how do you have, and I'm like, it's just who I am. I like, it's not even, I don't even see it as courage at this point. That one, I did wonder if someone's going to, off me for about the viruses and the vaccines. But,
Did
and
you have
I,
different threats, or you just had a sense? Like, why do you say that?
hmm,
Did you feel like you were being threatened, or you just had a sense like,
no, I just thought when people find, I mean, this information, the government doesn't want you to know that I mean, because it's not just that one, it's a lot of them.
yeah,
And they've given Americans chronic illness from all of these animal viruses that were spread through the vaccine program, like,
yeah.
HIV, Ebola, like all of these things, right?
Is Lyme disease? That would be another.
Probably. I haven't done a
Yeah,
deep enough dive to confirm that, but like there's enough of a rabbit trail there, right?
yeah,
Because they're experimenting on all these things like COVID, it was a gain of function, right? So, and we have 20 years of research data on COVID to show that.
yeah,
Did
yeah.
Xi Jinping from the Wuhan Institute make it? I don't know, but they're making it, right? So, like, but anyway, so this young man had asked me, we're talking about God, um, and I was saying that when I was in graduate school, or right when I was finishing up undergraduate, I started skydiving. I'm
Wow.
this 95-pound biochemistry, molecular biology, type A, super tight student who starts skydiving out of planes that are falling apart and held together with duct tape with like 50-year-old biker dudes.
Wow.
Okay. And I'm jumping in these airplanes because I love it, but it's scary. And like my sister called crying one day and she's like, "You've tried it. Why can't you stop?"
Oh,
So I jumped for 20 years. Right.
that
And
is
at some point, I was like, if you're going to do this, stop freaking yourself out and being afraid of it. And it wasn't just the fear of jumping out of the plane, which is bad enough. It was the fear of not being who I was supposed to be.
mm, yeah,
Right. We all have this picture that how we fit in with our family, with our friends, with society, and being seen as a weirdo or as irreverent or as taking chances with my life,
yeah,
and accepting that redefinition of who I was.
yeah,
So when it came back around, I struggled with it for years and just tortured myself. And I believe, and the thing was, I didn't need to skydive. I wasn't saving anybody's life. I wasn't doing anything amazing. But I believe it was God bringing that experience in. So, like when COVID hit, when I had to stand, when different things happened, I didn't have to go through that struggle again. I had already done that. I already knew when this calls, you answer. So God was calling me to skydive, I believe now, which
wow,
would have never thought that at the time. I felt like I was going against God and like taking chances with my life. But
yeah,
the calling in my soul was so strong, I couldn't say no, but I
that,
tortured myself with it.
yeah,
So when he called again, I didn't have to go through that struggle. I
mm,
didn't have to go through worrying about what people thought of me or worrying about whether I was answering a call or whatever. I just followed. And so I see God's hand in it now looking back at
yeah,
every single step of the way, even when I didn't know what I was doing.
yeah. There's a quote, Saint Catherine of Siena said, "Be who God made you to be, and you'll set the world on fire." And I feel like that really is an example of what you're doing. You're causing disruption where it should be caused. You're giving information when people are seeking it. And like you said, God was preparing you before in ways you didn't even see the connection until now. And I love that you're talking about this is your harvest season. This is when everything's kind of coming to fruition. And yeah, that's a beautiful way, I think, to just kind of close what we've been talking about. It's I can't thank you enough for your time. You're an extremely generous person, and you've helped so many lives. And I'm sure that one day you'll know how many lives you've affected. And I know right now it's probably just a small percentage of that. And thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah.
Well, thank you for your interest in taking the time to get this word out there. It's much appreciated. I think it was a beautiful interview. Like I get interviewed a lot, and when people don't know the right questions to ask, it's like it doesn't go well.
Well, I appreciate that. Especially like I said, SIDS is not something people are talking about with vaccines. And being that I have a 4-month-old, it's on my heart so much. And it almost brings me peace to know that at least one element of SIDS I'm hopefully avoiding by not vaccinating. So thank you. Thank you for your work, and I appreciate it.
All right. It's been beautiful. Thank you.
Bye bye.